This book is a journey into the art of embracing solitude, a map for those who are afraid of loneliness, and a guide for those who want to discover the richness within themselves. The cover of this book is simple first. It takes you through the fear and misconceptions of being alone. Then, it moves toward understanding solitude as strength rather than weakness. Afterward, it shows how to transform time alone into a powerful source of happiness, growth, and creativity. C-shaped one being alone is something that many people quietly fear, though they rarely admit it out loud, because society has taught us to equate solitude with rejection and loneliness with failure. But the truth is that being alone is not the absence of love or worth. It is the unavoidable reality of every human life, and the earlier we embrace it, the more peace we will find in ourselves. From childhood, we are surrounded by noise, family voices, school friends, neighbors, and later the demands of work, relationships, and community. And in the middle of all of this, solitude becomes a foreign concept, something that feels unnatural and threatening, almost like silence is accusing us of being unworthy of attention. When people feel restless in their own company, what they are really afraid of is not loneliness itself, but the confrontation with their inner thoughts, the raw, unfiltered voice of the self that often gets drowned out by business. To sit alone is to stand in front of a mirror that shows not only your beauty, but your wounds, your fears, your mistakes, your forgotten dreams. And for many this is a terrifying experience, so they avoid solitude at all costs, filling every gap in their day with distractions. Phones, television, endless social media, shallow conversations, just to keep themselves from hearing that inner voice. Yet, running from solitude is the same as running from yourself, and if you spend a lifetime avoiding your own presence, you will never truly know who you are, what you value, or what makes you authentically happy. To be happy alone begins with shifting the meaning of solitude in your mind. It is not punishment, it is not rejection, and it is not emptiness. Rather, it is a sacred opportunity to reconnect with yourself without interruptions. The silence that frightens many at first is the very space where self-awareness begins to grow. When you strip away the external noise and all the demands of others, what is left is the essence of your being, and that essence, once faced and embraced, is the foundation of unshakable joy. At first, solitude may feel like a dark room, unfamiliar and suffocating, but if you stay long enough, your eyes adjust and you begin to see treasures hidden in the shadows. Your resilience, your forgotten creativity, your inner wisdom, and your capacity to find peace without needing constant company. Think about how many people fear being alone after a breakup, after moving to a new place, or even in small everyday moments like sitting in a cafe by themselves. They feel exposed, like the world is watching and judging them for being solitary. But this fear is not a reflection of reality. It is a reflection of conditioning. We have been conditioned to believe that constant company is proof of value. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if the ability to sit with yourself in peace is the highest form of strength, because it proves that you are enough without external confirmation? People come and go, relationships change, life circumstances shift, and if your happiness is tied entirely to others, it will collapse each time something ends. But if you can cultivate happiness in solitude, you carry within you a freedom that nothing and no one can take away. This freedom is not about cutting people off or rejecting connection. It is about learning that connection begins within. If you cannot be a friend to yourself, no amount of friends will fill that void, and if you cannot enjoy your own company, you will always depend on others to distract you from yourself. Being happy alone is a practice, not a sudden realization, and it begins with small steps, allowing silence into your day, pausing for moments of reflection, and slowly reframing solitude from a weakness into a strength. Think of solitude as a training ground for resilience. When you can handle being by yourself without panic, you learn emotional independence. and emotional independence makes you stronger in every relationship and every challenge. Happiness alone is not about isolation or withdrawal. It is about the deep knowing that you are whole even when you stand in silence. To get there, you must first embrace the discomfort, because discomfort is the doorway to growth. Each time you resist the urge to escape solitude with distractions, you are teaching yourself to sit with your truth. And each time you do this, the fear lessens, until eventually solitude becomes not something to fear, but something to look forward to, because it is in those quiet hours that you recharge, rediscover, and realign. Imagine solitude as a room that you once avoided, thinking it was dark and empty, but upon entering, you discover it is filled with light and treasures that belong only to you. That is what Chapter 1 is about, the beginning of a new relationship with solitude, the realization that to be happy alone is not a tragedy, but a triumph, not emptiness, but fullness, not weakness, but power. The journey may begin with unease, but it ends with freedom. The freedom of knowing that wherever you go, whatever happens, you are never truly without joy, because joy lives within you. Happiness, as most of us have been taught to understand it, is something that lies outside of us, something to be achieved, gained, or granted by external circumstances. Yet this belief is the very reason why so many people remain trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction, because no matter how much they achieve, or how many relationships they build, the sense of fulfillment is fleeting, disappearing almost as soon as it is grasped. From early childhood, we are told stories that link joy to external validation. The applause of parents when we perform well, the approval of teachers when we excel in school, the affection of friends when we fit in, and later, the admiration of society when we succeed in careers, relationships, and status. But if you pause and observe closely, you will notice that all of these external sources are unstable, people's opinions change, circumstances evolve, achievements fade into memory, and the attention of others is never constant. If happiness is tied to something so unstable, then happiness itself becomes fragile, shattering at the first sign of disapproval, rejection, or loss. The key to being happy alone is to unlearn this conditioning, to detach joy from the approval of others, and discover that the real source of happiness has always been internal. This is not easy, because the mind has been trained for years to seek validation, like a child who keeps looking back to see if someone is watching before they dare to move forward. When you try to be alone and content, your thoughts may resist, whispering that something is missing, that you need someone to witness your joy for it to be real. But this is a trick of conditioning, not a truth of existence. Real happiness does not need witnesses. It is valid even in silence, even when no one claps for you, even when no one acknowledges your progress. Imagine for a moment two people, one whose sense of worth depends on being praised, and one who quietly loves their life regardless of whether anyone notices. Which one is truly free? The second person, of course, because they are not enslaved to the ever-shifting judgments of the world. To be happy alone means cultivating that kind of inner stability where your joy is not borrowed but owned. It begins with questioning the false narratives society has sold us. Why do we believe that being in a relationship is the only path to fulfillment? Why do we equate wealth with success and visibility with value? These beliefs are not universal truths. They are social constructs, and they collapse the moment you realize that happiness is not in possessions, people, or praise. It is in presence. Consider how often you have achieved something you thought would make you happy. Perhaps a new job, a new purchase, a new relationship, only to feel the thrill fade after a short time. This fading is proof that external happiness is temporary, like a flame that burns brightly but quickly dies without fuel. The problem is not with achieving or enjoying external things. The problem is relying on them as your only source of happiness. To be happy alone is to shift your foundation from external to internal, to place your joy on something unshakable, your own being. This does not mean rejecting people or pleasures. It means you no longer make them the condition of your peace. You can enjoy a friendship, but you do not crumble if it changes. You can celebrate success, but you do not lose your identity if it fades. You can love deeply, but you do not confuse love with dependence. When you reach this stage, solitude no longer feels threatening, because you are no longer waiting for others to confirm your worth. Instead, you become the source of your own affirmation. The moment you begin to see yourself as complete, the grip of external dependency loosens, and a new kind of happiness arises, quiet, stable, and enduring. This happiness may not always be dramatic. It may not bring the same whoosh as external victories, but it has something more valuable. It lasts. It remains steady in silence, in solitude, in simplicity. Imagine waking up and realizing that nothing outside of you has changed. Perhaps your career is uncertain. Perhaps your relationships are shifting, but you still feel at peace because you know that your worth and your joy were never tied to those things. That is the kind of freedom. Chapter 2 points toward freedom from the illusions that happiness is something to chase, earn, or beg for. Happiness is something to uncover, like sunlight hidden behind clouds, always there, waiting for you to clear away the beliefs that cover it. The practice of detaching from external validation takes time, and at first it may feel like you are walking into emptiness, because if joy is not in others, where is it? The answer is it is in you, in your awareness, in your ability to breathe, to notice, to be alive. This may sound simple, but simplicity is often the deepest truth. Look at children laughing at nothing in particular, or at nature blooming without needing applause. Joy is natural when it is not complicated by conditions. To be happy alone is to return to that natural state, to say I am worthy of joy without needing anyone else to prove it to me. Once you unlearn the false lessons of external dependency, you open the door to real independence. The independence of happiness that cannot be stolen, bought, or given by anyone else. This independence is not cold or detached. In fact, it allows you to connect more genuinely with others, because you are no longer using them as a crutch. You meet them as equals, as companions, not as saviors. That shift changes everything. So let Chapter 2 be the reminder that happiness is not borrowed, it is built, not in the applause of the world, but in the quiet certainty that you are enough, here and now, even when no one else is watching. Chapter 3 Silence is one of the most misunderstood experiences in life, because for many people silence feels like emptiness, like a void that must be filled immediately with noise, conversation, or distraction. But in reality, silence is not emptiness at all. It is presence, a deeper presence than most of us ever allow ourselves to feel. When you are alone in silence, your first instinct may be discomfort, because without the usual noise of the outside world, you are suddenly confronted with the noise of your inner world, the endless stream of thoughts, worries, regrets, and imagined futures that flood the mind when it is not occupied. At first, this inner noise can feel overwhelming, and many people rush to escape it by reaching for their phones, turning on music, calling someone, or finding anything to distract themselves. But if you resist that urge and allow yourself to stay in the silence, something remarkable begins to happen. The chaos of thoughts slowly starts to settle, like muddy water that clears when left undisturbed. This settling reveals something far more profound than distraction ever could. It reveals clarity. Clarity is born in silence, and it is in that clarity that you begin to truly meet yourself. The practice of being alone in silence is like learning a new language, awkward and uncomfortable at first, but with time, the language becomes familiar, and you begin to hear messages that were always there, but drowned out by constant noise. In silence, you may hear your own desires more clearly, desires that have been buried under the expectations of others. You may notice patterns in your thoughts that show you where your fears truly lie. You may uncover memories that need healing, or you may discover dreams that you had forgotten, but which quietly live in the background of your heart. Silence is not your enemy, it is your teacher. To be happy alone, you must learn to sit with silence without judgment, to accept it not as a void, but as a sacred space where you reconnect with yourself. Think of silence as the soil in which self-awareness grows. Just as a seed cannot sprout in noisy chaos, your inner wisdom cannot blossom if you never allow yourself to be still. Many people spend their entire lives running from silence, afraid of what they might hear if they stop long enough to listen. But the truth is that silence does not create fear. It simply reveals what was already there. Once revealed, those fears lose their power, because you can finally face them rather than letting them control you from the shadows. Imagine sitting quietly with no distractions, and at first your mind races, replaying conversations, imagining scenarios, criticizing yourself, or worrying about the future. This is normal, it is the mind's habit. But if you continue sitting, eventually the noise begins to slow, and in that slowing you discover something precious. Peace. This peace is not given by anyone else, nor is it tied to external conditions. It is yours, always available, waiting beneath the layers of thought and distraction. Silence teaches you that happiness is not about adding more, but about subtracting the unnecessary, stripping away the noise until only what matters remains. To be happy alone is to embrace silence as an ally, to let it guide you into deeper awareness of yourself and the world. Some people fear that silence is loneliness, but they are not the same. Loneliness is the belief that something is missing, while silence is the realization that nothing is missing in this moment. In silence, you begin to notice the small details of life, the rhythm of your breathing, the beating of your heart, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of the wind. And these small details reveal a truth: joy is not far away, it is present in every breath, but only silence makes you aware of it. This is why great thinkers, artists, and spiritual teachers throughout history have always valued solitude and silence. It is in these moments that inspiration, creativity, and wisdom arise. Silence is not passive, it is deeply active, a space where new ideas are born, where healing begins, where strength is cultivated. To train yourself to appreciate silence, start small. Spend a few minutes each day without distractions, simply sitting and observing your thoughts without chasing them. At first, the silence may feel unbearable, but with time, you will crave it, because it will become the place where you find balance, clarity, and peace. Happiness alone cannot exist without a relationship with silence, because without silence you are always escaping yourself, always dependent on noise to avoid the truth. But with silence, you discover that your own presence is enough, that being with yourself in stillness is not punishment, but privilege. Silence reminds you that happiness is not out there, waiting to be achieved. It is right here, waiting to be noticed. It does not shout. It whispers, and only in silence can you hear it. When you learn to listen, when you make peace with silence, you will realize that you were never truly afraid of being alone. You were afraid of not knowing yourself. Once you know yourself, silence becomes music, solitude becomes sanctuary, and happiness becomes your natural state, no longer dependent on external noise, but flowing gently from within. Power for solitude is often avoided because people believe it exposes emptiness, but in reality, solitude is the most powerful mirror you will ever stand before, a mirror that shows you who you truly are when no one else is watching, and it is within that reflection that the beauty of self-discovery begins. Every day of our lives we wear masks, sometimes many at once, crafted carefully to please, to impress, to protect, and to belong, and in doing so we forget the face beneath them. At work we may play the role of the capable professional, at home the responsible caregiver, with friends the agreeable companion, with strangers the polite acquaintance. Yet when all of these roles are stripped away, and you sit alone in silence, the question arises, who am I without the mask? This is the heart of Chapter 4, because solitude, rather than being a punishment, is an invitation to explore the truth of your own identity. It is a chance to peel away the layers of expectation and performance and meet the unfiltered self, the one that does not perform for applause or shape itself for approval, the one that simply exists. In the beginning, this meeting can feel uncomfortable, even frightening, because many people have lived so long in the roles given to them that they are strangers to themselves. They have defined their worth entirely by external measures. What others say, how much they earn, who loves them. And without those definitions, they feel lost. But solitude gives you the opportunity to replace borrowed identities with authentic discovery. When you are alone, you can ask yourself questions that no one else can answer. What truly excites me when no one is there to reward me? What do I value when the crowd is not pressuring me to conform? What do I dream of when I am not limited by fear of judgment? Each answer, though small at first, is a piece of your authentic self returning to the surface. It is in solitude that you remember hobbies you once loved but abandoned, passions that once lit you up but were silenced by responsibility, values you once held but compromised to fit in. Solitude is the time to listen again, to hear your own voice more clearly than the voices of the world. And with each rediscovery, you begin to feel a sense of freedom, because happiness is not built on pretending to be who you are not, but on embracing fully who you already are. Think about how much energy goes into maintaining a false identity. The stress of always being agreeable, the pressure of always being strong, the exhaustion of always meeting expectations. Pretending drains the spirit, but truth sets it free. When you are alone and discover your true preferences, your real strengths, your genuine desires, you no longer waste energy keeping up appearances. Instead, you begin to live in alignment with yourself, and alignment is the birthplace of joy. To be happy alone is not to deny the world, but to first find yourself, so that when you do step into the world, you bring authenticity rather than performance. This authenticity deepens every part of life, because when you know yourself, you are no longer afraid to set boundaries, to say no when necessary, to say yes to what matters, to walk away from what does not serve you, and to stand firmly in your values even when others disagree. Solitude teaches you that your worth does not depend on applause, because applause fades, but authenticity endures. The more time you spend alone honestly with yourself, the more confident you become in your identity, and confidence built from self-discovery is unshakable, because it does not need approval to survive. It is important to understand that self-discovery is not always comfortable. Sometimes solitude will reveal parts of yourself you have neglected or even disliked, but this too is part of the journey. When you see your flaws in solitude, you can begin to heal them without shame. When you face your fears, you can begin to overcome them. When you confront your regrets, you can begin to forgive yourself. Solitude does not just reveal your beauty, it reveals your wholeness, strengths, weaknesses, and all, and learning to embrace that wholeness is where deep happiness resides. Imagine sitting by yourself and realizing that you no longer feel the pressure to perform, that you no longer feel the need to prove anything, that you can breathe fully simply by being who you are. That moment is liberation, and liberation is joy. Solitude is the gift that allows you to experience this liberation, to know yourself without the noise of others. In that knowing, you realize that you are not broken, you are not lacking, you are not defined by what others have labeled you. You are a complete, evolving being, worthy of love, beginning with your own. And so Chapter 4 reminds you that solitude is not emptiness but discovery, not loneliness but authenticity, not a burden but a blessing. To be happy alone, you must first be brave enough to meet yourself, to stand in that mirror of solitude, and allow it to show you both your shadows and your light. And when you accept both with honesty and compassion, you step into the kind of joy that cannot be taken away, because it is rooted in truth, and truth is unshakable. Chapter 5. Learning how to be happy alone is not just about discovering yourself. It is also about cultivating habits that nourish your mind, body, and spirit in ways that make your solitude a source of energy rather than a place of emptiness. Because solitude without nurturing can feel like neglect, but solitude with intentional care becomes a sanctuary of peace. Many people believe that happiness comes only through interaction with others, that joy is tied to companionship, entertainment, or validation. But the truth is, happiness is rooted in how you treat yourself when no one else is around, and this is where self-care becomes not a luxury but a foundation. To be happy alone, you must develop routines that make you feel alive, energized, and grounded in your own presence. Start by paying attention to your physical body, because your body is not just a vessel carrying you through life. It is a living part of your experience, and when it is neglected, your mood, energy, and outlook are all affected. Simple practices like nourishing yourself with healthy food, moving your body through exercise, or even gentle stretching and prioritizing rest transform solitude from being idle to being restorative. Think of how different it feels to spend a day alone lying in bed scrolling endlessly through a phone, compared to a day spent cooking yourself a nourishing meal, taking a walk in fresh air, and reading something that inspires you. Both are alone, but one depletes while the other replenishes. This is the power of self-care in solitude. But self-care extends beyond the physical. It includes the way you speak to yourself, the way you allow or deny yourself compassion, and the way you create an environment where you feel at home with yourself. Many people speak harshly to themselves in ways they would never speak to another human being, criticizing, shaming, and belittling themselves for mistakes or shortcomings. And this internal voice makes solitude feel unbearable, because who would want to be left alone with someone who constantly criticizes? That is why self-compassion is essential. To be happy alone, you must learn to be gentle with yourself, to forgive your mistakes, to celebrate your efforts, and to encourage yourself as you would encourage a dear friend. Imagine how your solitude would change if, instead of scolding yourself for not being productive, you reminded yourself that rest is necessary. Imagine how it would feel if, instead of comparing yourself to others, you affirmed that your journey is unique and valuable. Happiness in solitude comes when your inner dialogue becomes a source of comfort rather than conflict. Another essential practice is creating rituals that turn ordinary moments into experiences of meaning. For example, making yourself a cup of tea and sitting in silence can become a ritual of mindfulness. Lighting a candle while journaling can transform writing into an act of reflection. Playing your favorite music while cleaning your space can turn a chore into a dance. Rituals give solitude rhythm, and rhythm prevents it from feeling empty. Happiness is often found in these small but intentional acts, because they remind you that you are capable of creating joy for yourself without needing anyone else to provide it. Beyond rituals, self-care in solitude also involves exploring creativity, because creativity is the soul expressing itself. You do not have to be a professional artist or musician to create. You can sketch, write, cook, garden, or simply imagine. When you allow your imagination to flow, you feel connected to your inner world in a way that is deeply fulfilling. Many people avoid solitude because they think it is boring, but boredom is often the doorway to creativity if you allow yourself to explore rather than escape. Instead of rushing to fill silence with distractions, ask yourself, what could I create in this moment? What idea could I pursue? What beauty could I bring into being? The more you create, the more you discover that solitude is a canvas rather than a void. Self-care in solitude also means setting boundaries, because if you are constantly giving your time, energy, and attention to others, then your alone time will always feel like a stolen fragment rather than a chosen sanctuary. You must protect your solitude the way you protect your responsibilities, recognizing that time spent alone caring for yourself is not wasted. It is necessary because without it, you cannot show up fully in other areas of your life. Say no when you need rest, disconnect from technology when it drains you, and prioritize quiet moments as much as you prioritize external commitments. In doing so, you teach yourself and others that your well-being matters. Finally, to be happy alone, practice gratitude in solitude. Gratitude shifts your focus from what is missing to what is present. And when you are alone, it is easy to dwell on what you do not have, companionship, attention, or approval. But if you shift your gaze to what you do have, the warmth of your home, the breath in your lungs, the opportunities to grow, the beauty of the present moment, you begin to realize that solitude is filled with blessings waiting to be acknowledged. Write them down, speak them out loud, or simply hold them in your heart, and you will find that happiness multiplies not by addition of external factors, but by appreciation of internal and existing ones. Chapter 5, therefore, teaches us that solitude becomes joyful when you treat it as sacred time for self-care, when you nurture your body, speak kindly to your mind, create beauty with your hands, protect your peace with boundaries, and cultivate gratitude with your heart. When you make these habits a part of your life, you no longer fear being alone, because you know solitude will never abandon you. Instead, it will always welcome you back as a place of healing, growth, and happiness. Chapter 6. When we talk about learning how to be happy alone, one of the most important shifts that we must make is in our perspective on solitude itself, because too often people see being alone as a sign of lack, as if solitude is proof of rejection, loneliness, or incompleteness, when in reality solitude can be one of the most powerful opportunities for growth, clarity, and renewal if we learn to embrace it with a healthy mindset. Chapter 6 is about shifting your perspective on solitude. Because perspective is everything, the same situation can feel like a prison or a sanctuary, depending on how you interpret it. For example, when someone is alone on a Saturday night scrolling through social media, they may feel inadequate, watching others post pictures of gatherings, dinners, and celebrations, and their solitude begins to feel heavy, as though life is passing them by. But if the same person shifted their mindset and saw their solitude as freedom, as an evening of peace where they can read, cook, meditate, or pursue a personal passion without interruption, suddenly that same solitude becomes valuable. The external situation did not change, but the internal narrative did, and that is the power of perspective. To shift your perspective on solitude, you must first release the cultural myths that tell you that happiness is only found in relationships, in constant social activity, or in being validated by others. These myths are deeply ingrained because from childhood we are taught that companionship is the ultimate goal. Fairy tales end with marriage, movies glorify friendships and romances, and social media bombards us with curated images of togetherness. But what is often left out is the truth that no external relationship can give you peace if you have not first learned to find it within yourself. Solitude is not punishment, it is preparation. It is the time where you learn about your own desires, values, and strengths without external influence clouding your vision. When you begin to see solitude not as something to escape, but as something to embrace, your entire emotional experience of being alone begins to transform. Instead of asking, "Why am I alone?" you start asking, "What can I discover in this moment of solitude?" Instead of seeing quiet as emptiness, you start seeing it as space for creativity, reflection, and rest. One way to shift perspective is to see solitude as a teacher. Every time you are alone, life is teaching you resilience, independence, and self-sufficiency. For instance, when you solve a problem without calling someone else, you realize your own resourcefulness. When you comfort yourself during sadness, you discover your own compassion. When you celebrate your small wins without needing an audience, you recognize your own worth. These are lessons that can only be learned in solitude, and they prepare you to bring healthier, stronger, and more grounded energy into relationships when they do come. Another way to shift perspective is to focus on abundance rather than lack. Often, when alone, people focus on what they do not have: companionship, conversation, intimacy. Yet solitude also gives you what many people in constant relationships long for: peace, time, freedom, and the ability to fully direct your own life. Think of solitude as a gift, a space where you have complete authority over your choices, your schedule, and your energy. Instead of filling the silence with worry, you can fill it with intention. Instead of longing for company, you can cultivate presence with yourself. Gratitude plays a key role here. When you begin to notice and appreciate the opportunities solitude gives you, happiness naturally grows. Another perspective shift is to see solitude as a reset button. Life can overwhelm us with noise, expectations, and responsibilities, and solitude offers a chance to slow down, to reconnect with our own rhythm, and to realign with what truly matters. When you are alone, you can hear your own thoughts clearly, without the interference of others' opinions. This clarity can lead to better decisions, deeper self-awareness, and stronger confidence in your path. Imagine solitude as a quiet room where your inner voice finally has the space to speak, and you might realize that what you once feared, silence, is actually the very thing you needed to regain direction. Shifting perspective also involves breaking free from comparison. When alone, it is easy to compare your life to others' highlights, thinking their togetherness is happiness while your solitude is lack. But what you see is never the whole story, and many people surrounded by others feel lonelier than those at peace with themselves. True happiness is not measured by the number of people around you, but by the quality of your relationship with yourself. If you shift your focus from external comparison to internal growth, you begin to see solitude as an investment rather than a deficiency. Another crucial part of perspective is reframing language. The words you use shape how you feel. If you constantly tell yourself, "I'm lonely," you reinforce emptiness. But if you instead tell yourself, "I am enjoying my solitude," or "I am recharging," you change the emotional weight of your experience. This is not about denying feelings, but about choosing language that empowers rather than weakens. Language is the lens through which we interpret reality, and when you shift your words, your feelings follow. Ultimately, Chapter 6 teaches that solitude is not about being without others, it is about being fully with yourself. It is not about absence, it is about presence. It is not about emptiness, it is about possibility. When you shift your perspective to see solitude as freedom, as a teacher, as a reset button, and as a gift, happiness begins to bloom, not because your external situation changed, but because your internal story did. Solitude no longer feels like a cage, but like an open field, and in that field you can plant seeds of creativity, self-love, peace, and gratitude that will continue to grow even when others join your journey. The happiness you find in this perspective shift is lasting because it does not depend on anyone else showing up. It is rooted in the relationship you build with yourself. Chapter 8, one of the most vital aspects of learning how to be happy alone is discovering the power of self-love, and Chapter 8 is dedicated to exploring how self-love becomes the cornerstone of your happiness, your resilience, and your capacity to thrive regardless of whether you are surrounded by people or standing alone, because without self-love, solitude can feel like a burden, but with self-love, solitude transforms into a sanctuary. Self-love is not vanity, nor is it arrogance. It is the deep, unwavering recognition that you are worthy, valuable, and deserving of kindness, even from yourself, especially from yourself. Many people are taught to seek love only from others, to crave approval from parents, friends, partners, or society, but when that external love is absent, they crumble under feelings of inadequacy and emptiness. The truth, however, is that the most stable and lasting form of love you will ever experience is the one you cultivate within yourself, because unlike external love, It does not depend on someone else's mood, availability, or choices. It is always accessible, always renewable, and always in your control. To love yourself in solitude is to stop treating your worth as conditional, to stop saying, I will love myself when I am successful, when I am loved by others, when I am thinner, richer, smarter, and to instead say, I love myself now, as I am, while I continue to grow. Self-love begins with acceptance, acknowledging your flaws without letting them define you, celebrating your strengths without diminishing them, and embracing your journey without constantly comparing it to someone else's. When you practice acceptance, solitude becomes a space where you do not judge yourself for being alone, but rather appreciate yourself for being present. You no longer interpret silence as rejection, but as an opportunity to reconnect with who you are. Another dimension of self-love is self-care, and in solitude this becomes crucial, because how you treat yourself when no one is watching reveals the depth of your love for yourself. Do you speak kindly to yourself, or do you criticize every mistake? Do you nourish your body with good food, rest, and movement, or do you neglect it because you feel no one else is there to notice? Do you give yourself time for hobbies, creativity, and rest, or do you only grant yourself permission to relax when you are with others? Self-care is not indulgence. It is the foundation upon which your well-being stands. In solitude, you can practice self-care without compromise, building routines that prioritize your mental, physical, and emotional health, and this in turn deepens your happiness. Another powerful aspect of self-love is setting boundaries. Many people feel uncomfortable being alone because they have lived too long ignoring their own needs, saying yes to everyone else while saying no to themselves, and in doing so, they lose touch with what they truly desire. But when you are alone, you have the chance to reset those boundaries, to practice listening to your inner voice and respecting it. If you love yourself, you no longer tolerate toxic endless obligations, or situations that drain your energy. You realize that protecting your peace is an act of love. Solitude is the training ground for this, because in solitude you learn that your peace is worth guarding, even if it means walking away from things that once defined you. Self-love also means forgiving yourself, and solitude brings this lesson into sharp focus. When alone, regrets and mistakes from the past often rise to the surface, and without self-love they can torment you, convincing you that you are unworthy. But with self-love, you learn to hold your mistakes with compassion, to see them as teachers rather than life sentences, to tell yourself, I did the best I could with what I knew then, and now I choose to grow. Forgiveness frees you from the chains of shame and allows you to embrace solitude as healing rather than punishment. Another vital practice of self-love is speaking to yourself as you would to someone you love. Many people reserve gentle words for friends, but criticize themselves harshly. Solitude exposes this inner dialogue, and it is in this space that you can begin to reframe your language, replacing I am not enough with I am learning, replacing I always fail with I am trying, replacing no one cares with I care about myself. Words shape feelings, and when you practice speaking lovingly to yourself, happiness begins to emerge even in the quietest moments. Self-love also involves celebrating yourself. Too often people wait for others to validate their achievements, to clap for their victories, or to acknowledge their efforts. But in solitude, you learn to be your own cheerleader, to recognize your progress and honor your journey without needing an audience. This doesn't mean you stop sharing joy with others, but it means that your sense of accomplishment no longer depends on external applause. You clap for yourself, you acknowledge your growth, and you feel proud without hesitation. Perhaps the most profound truth about self-love is that it teaches you that you are never truly alone. When you love yourself, you carry within you a constant companion, a friend, a source of strength. You no longer fear silence because you enjoy your own company. you no longer dread solitude, because it is filled with your own warmth. Self-love transforms loneliness into aloneness, and aloneness into wholeness. It fills the space around you with peace, and the space within you with joy. It allows you to stand firmly, to weather life's storms without crumbling, to celebrate without depending on others, and to keep walking even when no one is beside you. Chapter 8, therefore, is not just about the idea of self-love, but about living it, through acceptance, self-care, boundaries, forgiveness, kind self-talk and celebration, so that solitude becomes not a void but a vibrant place of growth. When you love yourself, happiness is no longer a destination you chase in the arms of others. It becomes the home you carry within yourself, a home that never abandons you, a home that remains whether you are surrounded by a crowd or sitting in silence. Chapter 9. Happiness in solitude is not only about loving yourself, but also about cultivating gratitude, because gratitude has the power to shift your entire perspective on life, transforming emptiness into fullness, scarcity into abundance, and isolation into connection, even when you are physically alone. And that is why Chapter 9 is devoted to the profound role of gratitude in learning how to be happy alone. Gratitude is more than simply saying, "Thank you." When someone does something for you, it is a deeper mindset, a way of seeing life through a lens that focuses on what you already have, instead of obsessing over what you lack. And when practiced consistently, gratitude becomes a shield against loneliness, helping you recognize that solitude does not mean emptiness, but rather that your life is already filled with blessings waiting to be acknowledged. When you sit alone and reflect with a grateful heart, you begin to notice the small miracles you once overlooked: the breath in your lungs, the roof above your head, the food that nourishes you, the health that allows you to move, the opportunities you've been given, the lessons you've learned from hardship, and even the ability to sit alone and think. Gratitude is powerful because it rewires your brain. Scientific studies have shown that practicing gratitude increases levels of happiness and decreases anxiety and depression. And this is because gratitude redirects your focus away from what you think is missing toward the richness of what is already present. In solitude, the temptation to dwell on what you don't have, such as companionship, validation, or support, can be overwhelming. But gratitude interrupts that pattern and reminds you that your life is not defined by what is absent, but enriched by what is present. Practicing gratitude can take many forms, and in solitude you have the space and freedom to explore them deeply. One practice is keeping a gratitude journal, where each day you write down 3 to 5 things you are thankful for. At first, they may feel small or repetitive, but over time this practice trains your mind to scan for positives instead of negatives, creating a habit of appreciation that spills into every area of life. Another practice is gratitude meditation, where you sit quietly, close your eyes, and bring to mind specific moments, people, or things that make you feel grateful, allowing the warmth of appreciation to expand in your heart. And as you practice this consistently, solitude becomes less of an empty room and more of a sacred space where gratitude fills the air. Gratitude also changes how you view your past and your challenges. Many people feel bitter when alone because they replay memories of rejection, loss, or failure, but gratitude invites you to reinterpret those moments as teachers, to ask, "What did I learn from this pain? How did it make me stronger? What blessings came because of what I went through?" For example, a heartbreak that left you alone may also have given you the chance to discover your independence. A failure that embarrassed you may have taught you resilience. A rejection may have redirected you to a better path. Gratitude does not erase the pain, but it reframes it, transforming solitude from punishment into preparation. Another important aspect of gratitude in solitude is appreciating yourself. Too often, people wait for others to recognize their worth. But when you are alone, you can choose to honor yourself with gratitude, thanking yourself for showing up, for surviving hardships, for working hard, for learning, for not giving up when life was heavy. This practice builds self-respect and reminds you that you are your own ally. Gratitude also extends outward, even when others are not physically present. When you sit in solitude, you can mentally send gratitude to the people who shaped you. Parents, teachers, friends, or even strangers whose kindness touched your life. This invisible connection nurtures a sense of belonging. You realize that even in solitude, you are not isolated from the web of humanity, but are held by countless unseen bonds of kindness, memories, and influences. Gratitude can also be practiced in the present moment by savoring simple joys, the taste of your favorite tea, the comfort of a soft blanket, the sound of rain, the beauty of a sunrise. These seemingly small experiences, when met with gratitude, expand into profound sources of happiness, and solitude amplifies this because without distractions, you can fully immerse yourself in these moments. In addition, gratitude prepares you for the future. Instead of obsessing over fears or uncertainties, gratitude anchors you in trust, reminding you that if life has blessed you in the past, it will continue to bless you in the future, and that trust reduces anxiety, replacing it with peace. Gratitude also connects deeply with humility, because when you are grateful, you acknowledge that much of your life is shaped by gifts beyond your control. The breath you did not earn, the sunlight you did not create, the opportunities that came to you unexpectedly. And humility makes solitude feel less like abandonment and more like communion with life itself. Perhaps the most beautiful gift of gratitude in solitude is that it shifts loneliness into contentment. When you focus on what you lack, you feel incomplete, but when you focus on what you have, you feel whole, and that wholeness is the essence of happiness. You realize that happiness is not about waiting for the perfect relationship, the perfect success, or the perfect circumstance. It is about appreciating the imperfect beauty of what is already here. Gratitude, then, is not a passive feeling, but an active choice, one you can make every single day, especially in moments of solitude. It is the decision to notice blessings rather than curses, to treasure presence rather than pine for absence, to embrace life as it is while remaining open to what it will become. In Chapter 9, we discover that gratitude is not just a tool for happiness, but a way of living that transforms solitude into serenity, teaching us that happiness is not found in endless longing, but in the deep appreciation of the here and now. And when gratitude fills your heart, being alone no longer feels like being empty, it feels like being full. Chapter 10. One of the most profound aspects of learning how to be happy alone is the ability to create a meaningful routine, a daily structure that brings order, stability, and purpose to your solitude, because without routine, days can feel like an endless blur, and loneliness has more room to creep in. But with routine, solitude becomes intentional, productive, and deeply fulfilling. And that is why Chapter 10 is devoted to the power of establishing a meaningful daily rhythm. When you are alone, it can be easy to fall into a habit such as sleeping at odd hours, skipping meals, or drifting aimlessly between distractions. And while these habits may temporarily numb the discomfort of solitude, they eventually magnify feelings of emptiness, leaving you feeling unanchored. But when you create a routine, you give yourself the gift of direction, and every day becomes a canvas on which you can paint meaning. A routine does not mean rigid schedules or robotic repetition. Rather, it is about crafting intentional practices that support your well-being and align with your deeper values. Imagine waking up each day not with dread, but with a quiet anticipation, because you have a series of rituals that nourish your body, mind, and spirit. This is the essence of a meaningful routine. The beauty of solitude is that you have the freedom to design your day entirely around what fulfills you, without compromise or external expectations, and this freedom can either overwhelm you with choices or empower you with purpose. A meaningful routine starts with mornings, because the way you begin your day shapes everything that follows. Waking up with intention, perhaps by stretching, meditating, journaling, or simply sitting in silence with a cup of tea, creates a foundation of mindfulness and gratitude, reminding you that solitude is not emptiness but opportunity. Once your mornings are anchored, the rest of the day can be shaped around activities that nurture your growth. When alone, work and rest can blend into monotony unless balanced intentionally, so building in focused blocks of productivity, whether it is professional tasks, creative projects, or personal learning, helps you feel accomplished and connected to your goals. At the same time, solitude allows you to prioritize self-care without guilt. Cooking nourishing meals, exercising, reading, or spending time outdoors can all become cherished parts of your routine, and each of these small acts contributes to a sense of wholeness. A routine is also about rituals of joy, weaving moments of happiness into your day intentionally instead of waiting for them to appear. For example, setting aside time to listen to music, write in a gratitude journal, paint, garden, or simply walk in nature transforms solitude into a sanctuary where joy becomes a habit, not a coincidence. It is important to remember that a meaningful routine does not have to be grand or dramatic. In fact, its power lies in the small consistencies. Cooking breakfast for yourself, making your bed, or lighting a candle each evening may seem insignificant, but these small acts signal to your mind and heart that you matter, that your life is worth tending to, and that even in solitude, there is structure and care. Another layer of creating a meaningful routine in solitude is setting boundaries with distractions. Without people around, technology often becomes a substitute for companionship, but endless scrolling or digital noise can leave you feeling emptier than before. Building a routine that includes intentional time offline allows you to reconnect with yourself more deeply, proving that solitude is about presence, not escape. Furthermore, routines help you honor your natural rhythms. In solitude, you can experiment with what times of day you feel most creative, energetic, or reflective, and build your activities around those cycles instead of forcing yourself into someone else's pattern. This level of self-discovery can only emerge when you give yourself the attention that solitude affords. A meaningful routine also nurtures resilience, because when life feels uncertain or emotions feel heavy, your routine becomes a stabilizing force, reminding you that even in difficult times, there are practices and rhythms that hold you together. It becomes a safety net for your mind and spirit, proving that happiness in solitude is not about avoiding struggle, but about building structures that support you through it. Over time, as you continue practicing your routine, solitude shifts from feeling like a void to feeling like a gift. You realize that routine is not about restriction but about liberation, because by choosing how you spend your time, you free yourself from drifting aimlessly or depending on others for structure. Your days begin to hold meaning, not because someone else fills them, but because you have filled them yourself, and that realization is empowering. Even in moments when loneliness whispers, your routine can carry you forward, reminding you that life is rich with opportunities for growth, healing, and joy, even when experienced alone. Chapter 10 teaches us that happiness in solitude is not only about mindset, but also about practice, and the daily practices you create for yourself become the rhythm of your contentment. A meaningful routine is your compass, pointing you toward fulfillment each day, showing you that solitude does not mean stagnation but growth, not absence but presence, not emptiness but intentionality. With routine, your solitude becomes a sacred rhythm, and in that rhythm, happiness takes root and flourishes. Chapter 11, a crucial aspect of learning how to be happy alone lies in mastering the art of self-reflection, and Chapter 11 is dedicated to understanding how taking time to examine your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors while alone can dramatically deepen your sense of self-awareness, guide your personal growth, and enhance your overall happiness. Because without reflection, solitude can easily become aimless and disorienting, but with intentional reflection, solitude transforms into a rich laboratory for understanding yourself, your patterns, and your life's purpose. Self-reflection is not simply thinking about your day or replaying events. It is a deliberate and mindful process of observing your own mind, questioning your reactions, exploring your desires, and assessing your progress. And this practice, when done consistently, reveals patterns that often go unnoticed in the business of life or the distractions of social interactions. Many people fear facing themselves, thinking that prolonged self-examination will magnify flaws or bring uncomfortable truths to light. But the truth is that avoidance only prolongs confusion, stagnation, and dependence on external validation, whereas self-reflection allows you to confront reality with honesty, compassion, and insight. In solitude, you have the rare opportunity to slow down, to create the mental space necessary for deep thinking, and to ask yourself questions that are rarely posed in the company of others. Who am I beyond my roles and responsibilities? What truly matters to me? What are the recurring thoughts or fears that influence my choices? What actions am I taking that align with my values, and where am I straying? These questions, though sometimes uncomfortable, are essential because self-awareness is the foundation upon which all other aspects of happiness are built. Through self-reflection, you also gain clarity about your emotional landscape. Many people spend years reacting to emotions without understanding their origins, causing unnecessary stress, frustration, or sadness. Solitude allows you to trace the root of your feelings, why a certain situation triggers anger, why a specific memory invokes sadness, or why a seemingly small event brings joy. By identifying the sources of your emotions, you gain control over them, instead of being controlled by them, and this mastery is a cornerstone of contentment in being alone. Journaling is one of the most effective tools for self-reflection, because writing allows thoughts and feelings to surface in ways that internal thinking alone cannot. When you write about your day, your emotions, your goals, and your experiences, you externalize what is inside, giving your mind the ability to see patterns, make connections, and uncover hidden insights. Over time, these written reflections become a map of your personal evolution, showing you where you have grown, where you struggle, and what steps you might take to continue progressing. Meditation and mindful observation are additional practices that enhance self-reflection. Sitting quietly and observing your thoughts without judgment allows you to distinguish between fleeting worries and deeper truths. This practice teaches patience with yourself, strengthens emotional regulation, and builds the ability to remain grounded even during difficult circumstances. And it is especially powerful when practiced in solitude, where there are no external demands or interruptions. Self-reflection in solitude also enables you to set more authentic goals and priorities. Without the pressure of others' expectations, you can assess what truly brings meaning to your life versus what you are pursuing because of social pressure or comparison. You may discover passions you had ignored, relationships you need to nurture or release, or personal habits that require adjustment. In this process, you learn to design your life intentionally rather than reactively, and intentional living is a key ingredient in long-term happiness. Another essential benefit of self-reflection is that it strengthens resilience and problem-solving. When you are alone and faced with challenges, reflection allows you to analyze situations calmly, evaluate options, anticipate consequences, and make decisions with clarity rather than panic. Over time, you develop confidence in your ability to navigate life independently, reducing fear and increasing satisfaction in your own company. Self-reflection also encourages gratitude and humility. By examining your experiences closely, you become aware of the ways you have grown, the obstacles you have overcome, and the lessons learned, fostering appreciation for your own journey. You also become aware of the contributions of others and the interconnectedness of life. which softens ego-driven tendencies and promotes inner peace. Importantly, self-reflection is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice, a habit that compounds over time. Just as physical exercise strengthens the body, regular self-reflection strengthens the mind and spirit, allowing you to respond to life with intention, wisdom, and calm. In solitude, you have the freedom to reflect without interruption, to sit with your thoughts fully, and to explore the depths of your own mind in ways impossible amidst constant social noise. Chapter 11 teaches that self-reflection is not about judging yourself harshly or seeking perfection. It is about understanding yourself compassionately, learning from experience, and aligning your actions with your authentic values. Through this practice, solitude ceases to be empty or lonely and instead becomes a laboratory of insight, a sanctuary of growth, and a place where happiness is not dependent on external validation, but emerges naturally from clarity, understanding, and self-mastery. Chapter 12, a pivotal element of learning how to be happy alone, is understanding the importance of embracing your passions and personal interests, and Chapter 12 focuses on how dedicating time and energy to what truly excites and inspires you transforms solitude from a space of loneliness into a playground of joy. Because when you immerse yourself in your passions, your mind and heart are engaged in ways that generate fulfillment from within, independent of external validation or companionship. And this internal engagement is one of the most reliable paths to lasting happiness. Many people spend their lives pursuing obligations or goals imposed by society, family, or peer expectations, often setting aside their genuine interests for the sake of approval or practicality. And in doing so, they cultivate a dependence on others for their sense of meaning and satisfaction, which becomes painfully apparent in moments of solitude. Embracing your passions, on the other hand, allows you to reclaim agency over your own life, to define your worth not by someone else's standards, but by your own engagement with what brings you alive. Whether it is painting, writing, gardening, coding, playing music, hiking, or any pursuit that captivates your attention, dedicating time to these interests enriches your solitude and fosters self-expression, creativity, and self-discovery. When you are alone and fully engaged in a passion, the world of worry, comparison, and distraction fades away, leaving only the immersive experience of creation, learning, or exploration. And this flow state generates intrinsic satisfaction that does not depend on others' presence. Moreover, passions provide a sense of purpose that anchors your life, even when external circumstances feel uncertain or isolating. They create goals, projects, and challenges that motivate you, giving structure to your time alone and reinforcing your sense of competence and achievement. For instance, committing to learn a new instrument or language allows you to measure progress over time, celebrate small victories, and experience the satisfaction of consistent growth. This cultivates confidence and pride, reinforcing the notion that solitude can be a space of personal empowerment rather than emptiness. Engaging with your passions also has profound psychological benefits, as it reduces stress, enhances mood, and fosters resilience. When you are absorbed in what you love, you temporarily release worries, self-criticism, and anxiety, replacing them with a sense of immersion and accomplishment. This psychological escape is not avoidance but a rejuvenating recharge that strengthens your emotional well-being and prepares you to face life's challenges with clarity and energy. Another critical aspect is that pursuing passions nurtures self-expression and authenticity, which are essential for happiness in solitude. Many people spend time alone reflecting on what they should do rather than what they genuinely desire, which perpetuates dissatisfaction. But when you dedicate time to your passions, you honor your own preferences, curiosities, and creativity, affirming that your happiness is valid and self-directed. Solitude thus becomes a laboratory for exploring your authentic self, a time to experiment with interests without the fear of judgment, and a safe space to cultivate the facets of your identity that may have been neglected or suppressed in social contexts. Furthermore, embracing your passions fosters mindfulness and presence. When you are fully engaged in an activity that captivates your mind, you enter a state of focus where past regrets and future anxieties fade, and you experience the richness of the present moment. This capacity for presence enhances your appreciation of life and deepens your enjoyment of solitude, because you realize that fulfillment is not contingent on external factors, but emerges naturally from immersion in meaningful activity. Passions also encourage self-discipline and perseverance, qualities that reinforce independence and self-reliance. By committing to a project, skill, or creative pursuit, you strengthen your ability to set goals, manage your time, and overcome obstacles on your own, demonstrating that happiness does not require constant companionship or approval, but grows from your own effort and dedication. Another layer of benefit comes from the social value of passions. When you choose to share them later, the skills, insights, and creations you develop in solitude can be shared with others in ways that bring connection, inspiration, and joy. But crucially, their value is not dependent on others' recognition. You are first fulfilled in the private act of engagement. Importantly, passions evolve over time, and solitude allows you to explore new interests, revisit old hobbies, or expand your expertise, giving your life flexibility, novelty, and a sense of ongoing discovery. This continuous engagement keeps your solitude dynamic rather than stagnant, ensuring that each moment alone carries potential for growth, creativity, and self-fulfillment. Chapter 12, therefore, emphasizes that happiness in solitude is deeply intertwined with dedicating time and energy to what ignites your curiosity and passion. By fully embracing your personal interests, you transform alone time into a source of purpose, joy, and self-expression, cultivating a life where your fulfillment originates from within, and where solitude is celebrated as a space for growth, creativity, and authentic happiness rather than something to endure or escape. When you engage deeply with your passions, being alone no longer feels like deprivation, it feels like liberation, a rare opportunity to connect fully with yourself, to develop your talents, and to experience the profound satisfaction of living according to your own desires, rhythms, and values, creating a lasting foundation for happiness that no external circumstance can take away. Chapter 13, one of the most transformative steps toward learning how to be happy alone is developing emotional independence, and Chapter 13 is dedicated to understanding how freeing yourself from over-reliance on others' validation, approval, and presence can dramatically enhance your ability to find contentment, peace, and joy within your own company, because too often people look outward for emotional fulfillment, expecting friends, family, or partners to fill the gaps of self-worth. And when those external sources are unavailable or inconsistent, loneliness, disappointment, and anxiety thrive, whereas cultivating emotional independence allows you to anchor your happiness in your own mind and heart, creating stability and resilience that cannot be shaken by circumstance or absence. Emotional independence does not mean rejecting connection or closing yourself off from meaningful relationships. Rather, it means understanding that while connections can enrich life, they are not the source of your fundamental well-being, and that your sense of value, joy, and self-esteem is not contingent upon others' behavior, attention, or acknowledgement. To develop emotional independence, one must begin by observing the ways in which dependence on others has shaped past experiences, how the need for approval influenced decisions, how fear of rejection prevented authentic expression, and how seeking external validation created anxiety when expectations were unmet, and then consciously choosing to shift that reliance inward. Self-reflection, journaling, and mindfulness practices play a crucial role in this process, allowing you to identify triggers, patterns, and emotional dependencies that erode your autonomy and then develop strategies for responding differently. For example, when a compliment is absent or praise delayed, an emotionally independent person does not internalize this as a deficiency, but rather recognizes that their worth is inherent, unaltered by external opinion. Another essential practice is cultivating self-soothing techniques, because emotional independence is built upon the ability to comfort, encourage, and motivate oneself without needing someone else to do so. When feelings of sadness, frustration, or fear arise, instead of seeking immediate relief from others, you learn to acknowledge your emotions, understand their origins, and engage in actions that restore equilibrium, whether through deep breathing, journaling, physical activity, meditation, or creative expression. This ability to manage your internal state fosters a sense of stability that allows you to experience solitude as restorative rather than threatening. Emotional independence also involves developing confidence in decision-making, because when you rely too heavily on others for direction, you diminish your sense of agency. But by learning to trust your judgment, evaluate options critically, and act decisively, you strengthen both self-reliance and self-respect. Over time, you realize that the courage to make choices alone, without needing consensus or reassurance, builds resilience and a deep-seated sense of competence, which is a cornerstone of happiness in solitude. Another key aspect of emotional independence is letting go of comparison and social comparison anxiety. People often measure their worth against the lives, achievements, or possessions of others, and this external benchmarking creates chronic dissatisfaction, especially when alone, because social media, news, and peer interactions constantly reinforce perceived gaps. By developing emotional independence, you learn to define success and happiness on your own terms, guided by your values, desires, and personal growth rather than by societal expectations or the lives of others. Gratitude, self-acceptance, and self-compassion become tools in this process, helping you appreciate your own journey and recognize that your path is valid, unique, and sufficient. Emotional independence also deepens your capacity for meaningful relationships, paradoxically enhancing social connection rather than diminishing it. When you are no longer dependent on others to fill emotional voids, your relationships become more authentic, balanced, and enriching because you engage from a place of wholeness rather than neediness. You are able to give freely without expectation, listen without defensiveness, and interact without anxiety, and this transforms your interactions into sources of joy rather than validation-seeking exercises. Furthermore, emotional independence empowers you to embrace solitude without fear. When you are comfortable managing your own emotional state, alone time ceases to feel like deprivation or punishment. It becomes an opportunity to reflect, recharge, and nurture your inner life. You can fully enjoy moments of silence, creative exploration, and self-care because you are not looking for external affirmation to feel complete. Practicing emotional independence also requires patience and persistence because old habits of dependence may resurface and self-doubt may occasionally creep in. But by consistently reminding yourself of your inherent worth, practicing self-soothing, making autonomous decisions, and celebrating your progress, you gradually reinforce a stable, internalized sense of happiness that is resilient in any circumstance. Chapter 13 ultimately teaches that the foundation of being happy alone lies not merely in occupying time or keeping busy, but in cultivating emotional autonomy, in trusting your inner resources, and in recognizing that your fulfillment originates from within. By embracing emotional independence, you create a life where solitude is not feared, loneliness is not crippling, and happiness is self-sustaining. A profound realization that transforms the way you experience both yourself and the world around you, and ensures that your sense of well-being is anchored in the one relationship that matters most, the one you have with yourself. Chapter 14. One of the most powerful lessons in learning how to be happy alone is embracing the practice of mindfulness, And Chapter 14 is devoted to understanding how being fully present in each moment allows you to transform solitude from a state of boredom, restlessness, or anxiety into a space of clarity, peace, and joy. Because mindfulness trains the mind to focus on what is happening now, rather than dwelling on past regrets or future worries. And this ability to remain grounded in the present is essential for cultivating true contentment when you are alone. Too often, people perceive alone time as empty or uncomfortable because the mind drifts into overthinking, ruminating on mistakes, longing for companionship, or anticipating problems that may never arise. And these thought patterns intensify feelings of loneliness, stress, and dissatisfaction. Mindfulness interrupts this cycle by teaching you to observe your thoughts without judgment, to experience your emotions without being overwhelmed by them, and to engage with life as it unfolds moment by moment. By doing so, you create a mental environment in which solitude is not threatening, but nourishing, a sanctuary where you can rest, reflect, and engage meaningfully with yourself. Practicing mindfulness begins with small but consistent exercises, such as paying attention to your breathing, noticing the sensations in your body, or observing the sounds and sights around you. For example, when you sit quietly, instead of thinking about what you have to do next or what is missing from your life, you might notice the rhythm of your breath, the feeling of the chair beneath you, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, or the sounds of nature outside. This simple act of observing without judgment grounds you in the present and reinforces the understanding that happiness is not solely tied to external circumstances, but is available in every moment if you are willing to notice it. Another essential aspect of mindfulness is cultivating awareness of your thoughts and emotions. Rather than being swept away by negative thinking or obsessive mental loops, mindfulness teaches you to watch your thoughts as they arise and pass, recognizing them as temporary phenomena rather than absolute truths. For instance, if feelings of loneliness emerge, instead of labeling yourself as unworthy or incomplete, you observe the sensation, acknowledge its presence, and allow it to exist without resistance, understanding that it is only one part of your experience and will naturally change over time. This practice fosters emotional regulation, self-compassion, and resilience, which are critical for maintaining happiness in solitude. Mindfulness also encourages appreciation for small, often overlooked experiences. When you engage fully with whatever activity you are doing, whether cooking, walking, reading, or meditating, you heighten your awareness of the richness in seemingly ordinary moments. This deep presence allows joy to emerge naturally, because instead of waiting for dramatic events or external validation, you learn to find satisfaction in the simple act of being alive, which is especially valuable when alone. Another key benefit of mindfulness is its ability to reduce attachment to outcomes. Often, people are unhappy in solitude because they cling to expectations, hoping that something external, a relationship, an achievement, or a change in circumstances, will finally bring fulfillment. Mindfulness teaches that happiness is not found in clinging but in observing, accepting, and appreciating what is, which liberates you from endless striving and creates space for inner peace. A daily mindfulness practice also strengthens your connection with yourself, allowing you to understand your desires, values, and needs more clearly. When alone, it is easy to become distracted by external influences or to lose sight of what truly matters. But mindfulness invites you to listen attentively to your inner voice, fostering self-awareness and empowering you to make choices aligned with your authentic self. This practice can take many forms, including meditation, mindful walking, deep breathing exercises, or even fully attending to daily routines such as washing dishes or enjoying a cup of tea. The key is intentionality and presence, the commitment to notice each moment fully rather than letting life pass by unnoticed. Mindfulness also enhances creativity and problem solving, because when your mind is calm and focused, insights often arise naturally, and your ability to engage deeply with your interests, hobbies, and passions improves dramatically. This contributes to a sense of accomplishment, satisfaction, and fulfillment that is independent of others' presence or validation. Furthermore, mindfulness fosters gratitude, as being present allows you to notice and appreciate the abundance already in your life, rather than focusing on what is absent. This sense of appreciation amplifies happiness in solitude, as each moment becomes an opportunity to connect with the richness of your experience, rather than yearning for something outside yourself. Chapter 14 teaches that through mindfulness, solitude is no longer a state to endure but a space to celebrate, a place to rest, explore, and grow. By observing your thoughts, grounding yourself in the present, engaging fully with experiences, and cultivating awareness of both challenges and blessings, you transform alone time into a powerful tool for personal growth, inner peace, and lasting happiness, ultimately discovering that the present moment, fully embraced, is the true source of contentment that solitude offers. Chapter 15. The final step in mastering the art of being happy alone is cultivating a sense of purpose, and Chapter 15 focuses on how finding and nurturing a personal mission or calling can transform solitude into a profound source of meaning, motivation, and fulfillment, because purpose anchors your life, guiding your actions, decisions, and thoughts in a direction that transcends temporary emotions, external circumstances, or the presence of others. And when you develop a clear sense of purpose, alone time ceases to feel empty and instead becomes fertile ground for growth, creativity, and self-realization. Many people struggle with loneliness or dissatisfaction in solitude because they lack clarity about why they are here, what truly matters to them, or how they can make a meaningful impact. And in the absence of purpose, daily routines can feel repetitive, unfulfilling, or monotonous, leaving the mind vulnerable to self-doubt and boredom. Discovering purpose requires deep self-reflection and honest inquiry into your values, passions, skills, and the contributions you wish to make to the world or to yourself. It is about asking questions like, what brings me joy and fulfillment? What am I naturally drawn to? How can I align my daily actions with my deepest values? And what impact do I want to create, even in small ways, that resonates with who I am? By answering these questions, you create a roadmap that directs your solitude toward intentional and meaningful action. Purpose is deeply personal, and it does not need to be grand or recognized by others to be valid. It can manifest in nurturing relationships, pursuing creative projects, contributing to your community, learning new skills, or simply cultivating a life that reflects your values and aspirations. The key is that your purpose provides direction and motivation, giving your mind and heart a sense of alignment, even when you are alone. Cultivating purpose also enhances resilience, because challenges and setbacks become easier to navigate when they are contextualized within a broader vision of meaning. When you know why you are doing something, the effort required feels worthwhile, and obstacles are seen not as threats, but as opportunities for growth, learning, and refinement. This perspective is particularly powerful in solitude, where external support or encouragement may be limited, because it allows you to sustain momentum, maintain focus, and continue evolving even in the absence of others' guidance or validation. Purpose also encourages self-discipline and consistency as you begin to prioritize actions that contribute to your goals and align with your values. When you have a clear mission, even small daily actions acquire significance. Reading to expand your knowledge, practicing a skill, meditating, exercising, or writing in a journal become meaningful contributions to the larger trajectory of your life. This focus transforms routine activities into opportunities for growth and fulfillment, and the cumulative effect over time reinforces a deep sense of satisfaction and accomplishment that is independent of external approval. Another crucial aspect of purpose is that it fosters intrinsic motivation, a source of energy that comes from within rather than from recognition or reward. When your actions are guided by personal meaning, you experience joy, engagement, and commitment that is sustainable and self-renewing, allowing you to embrace solitude with enthusiasm rather than reluctance. Purpose also strengthens your connection with yourself because it requires attentiveness to your own desires, values, and goals, helping you to live authentically rather than conforming to societal pressures or expectations. This alignment between inner values and outward action cultivates confidence, peace, and satisfaction, all of which are vital for happiness in solitude. Moreover, having a sense of purpose fosters gratitude and perspective. When you are aware of the contributions you are making, whether through personal growth, creative expression, or service, you are more likely to recognize and appreciate the abundance in your life, deepening your contentment even when alone. Purpose, when cultivated consistently, also enhances creativity and innovation. Knowing that your actions have significance encourages experimentation, problem-solving, and the pursuit of new ideas, and solitude provides the ideal environment for such exploration, free from distraction or judgment. Chapter 15 emphasizes that the combination of self-awareness, reflection, mindfulness, and emotional independence converges in the cultivation of purpose, transforming alone time into a period of intentional living and meaningful engagement. By connecting with your personal mission, you harness the power to shape your own life narrative, to invest energy in what truly matters, and to experience fulfillment from within. In this way, happiness is no longer dependent on companionship, circumstances, or external validation, because it is grounded in the certainty that your life has direction, significance, and meaning. Ultimately, Chapter 15 teaches that when you cultivate purpose, solitude becomes a sanctuary of growth, joy, and authenticity, where every moment is an opportunity to align with your values, pursue your passions, and contribute to a life that feels whole, empowering you to embrace being alone, not as a deficit, but as a profound opportunity to live fully and intentionally, creating a lasting foundation for happiness that emanates from within and sustains you under any circumstances.